The sun had already begun its descent behind the rugged mountains when Thomas Whitmore heard the knock at his door. It wasn't the polite tap of a neighbor or the urgent pounding of someone in trouble. It was 3 slow, deliberate thuds that seemed to shake the wooden frame of his modest ranch house. He wiped the dust from his hands onto his worn trousers and opened the door, unprepared for what stood before him. She was enormous, towering nearly 7 feet tall, with shoulders broad as an ox and arms thick with muscle. Her dark skin glistened with sweat and dust from the trail, and her long black hair hung in tangled ropes down her back. Most striking were her eyes, deep round pools that held both exhaustion and an unspoken plea. She wore traditional Apache clothing, leather and beads, and carried nothing but a small pouch at her waist. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse, cracked like the parched earth beneath their feet. "Water," she said simply, her English broken but clear enough. Thomas had heard the stories. Everyone in this part of Arizona Territory had. The year was 1873, and tensions between settlers and Apache tribes ran as hot as the desert sun. Men like him were supposed to turn away, supposed to protect what was theirs, supposed to fear what they didn't understand. His neighbors would call him foolish. His wife, God rest her soul, would have called him compassionate. She had been gone 3 years now, taken by fever, leaving him alone with nothing but this small ranch and the principles she had instilled in him. He didn't hesitate. "Come," he said, stepping aside. The woman didn't enter the house. Instead, she remained on the porch while Thomas brought out his largest bucket, filled to the brim with cool well water. She drank deeply, water streaming down her chin and neck, her throat working with desperate gulps. When she finished, she looked at him with those penetrating eyes and simply nodded. Then she turned and walked into the gathering darkness, her massive form soon swallowed by the desert shadows. Thomas stood on his porch long after she'd gone, watching the stars emerge, one by one, across the vast sky. He thought of his wife, of the Bible she'd read to him on quiet evenings, of her insistence that kindness was never wasted, even when the world seemed determined to prove otherwise. He went to bed that night with a strange peace settling over his chest, unaware that his life was about to change forever. Dawn broke with the sound of thunder, except there were no clouds. Thomas stumbled from his bed and peered through the window, his heart seizing in his chest. They surrounded his property completely, 300 strong by his estimate, maybe more. Apache warriors on horseback, their faces painted for war, their weapons ready. The morning sun glinted off rifle barrels and the deadly points of arrows. His small ranch house sat at the center of this circle of potential death, and Thomas understood with crystal clarity that he would not survive whatever came next. He dressed slowly, his hands surprisingly steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. If this was his end, he would meet it standing upright, with dignity. He had shown kindness to a stranger. If that was his crime, he would accept the consequences. He thought again of his wife, and the thought brought him comfort rather than sorrow. Perhaps he would see her soon. When he opened his door, the woman from the previous night stood at the front of the assembled warriors. In daylight, she was even more imposing, and now he understood why. This was no ordinary woman. The respect shown by the warriors, the way they parted for her, the authority in her bearing, all spoke of her position. She was someone of great importance, perhaps a chief's wife, perhaps a leader in her own right. She spoke in Apache, her voice carrying across the silent morning. An older warrior translated, his English better than hers had been. "Last night, I was dying of thirst. I had been cast out, left to perish in the desert for breaking tribal law. I walked for 3 days without water. By all rights, I should be dead. This man had every reason to turn me away. His people and mine have killed each other. He risked the anger of his neighbors. He risked everything. But he gave me water. He gave me life." The woman continued speaking, and the translator went on. "She says that a life debt must be repaid. She says that you have shown that not all white men are enemies. She says that this ranch and this man are under the protection of her people. Any who harm him will answer to the Apache." Thomas stood speechless as the woman approached. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a beaded token, pressing it into his weathered palm. Then she did something that shocked him to his core. She smiled, a genuine expression of gratitude that transformed her severe features, and she placed one massive hand briefly on his shoulder. The warriors turned as one, a choreographed movement of horses and men, and rode away into the desert from which they'd come. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving only dust and hoofprints as evidence they'd ever been there. Thomas stood on his porch, clutching the beaded token, tears streaming down his face. His wife had been right all along. Kindness was never wasted. A single bucket of water had purchased his life, but more than that, it had proven that even in a world divided by fear and hatred, simple human decency could still bridge the widest chasms. He had given water to a stranger. She had given him tomorrow.